come here to cause any trouble. I came here to do my job, and now I'm handcuffed. This is your Canada now, folks. You know, this is the Gestapo taking blackface's orders. Outrageous. And meanwhile, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is not a terrorist organization. Is not a terrorist organization. And these liberals have the audacity to show up at a vigil for a plane in which almost 200 people were killed, 57 Canadians, one unborn child, by the way. And look at this. They don't want, it is against the law in Blackface's Canada to ask insensitive questions, impolite questions. So a Canadian government that props up an Islamo-fascist regime, that's okay. But if you ask questions about that, that's not okay. This is an absolute outrage. I didn't come here to cause trouble, folks. I just came here to ask questions.
You're going to have to back up a little bit, okay? They're conducting an
That's my cameraman, so he's not doing anything.
No, I just want to provide some space so that everybody's safe here, okay?
Fast forward, the RCMP have been all but silent on what's happening here, although this has been international news. It's everywhere. I think the night it happened, it was talked about on 3 Fox News shows, and Fox News is the world's largest cable news channel, like most viewed cable news channel. So that's kind of a big deal. And like people who hate us are even outraged at that, which, you know, is fine. But I wish they didn't have to do the social hygiene of denouncing us before they denounce what happened to David. Just say what happened to David is bad. That's like saying, well, she shouldn't have been raped, but you know what, her skirt. I said, well, that was above her knee, you know? Anyway, the RCMP have said this is under review. Great. They're going to review themselves and find themselves not guilty. The liberals do that all the time, right? Freeland has not said a word. And she was asked about it in a press conference yesterday, her first public appearance since her smirking little exit as a journalist was falsely arrested and then falsely accused of assault, literally right in front of her as a former journalist. So let's take a listen to this.
What do you make of your security detail arresting David Menzies?
So I want to start with what was important about Monday. And what was important about Monday, January 8th, was that was the 4th anniversary of a date that I think forever needs to be marked and circled in black on the calendar of all Canadians. It was a tragedy for Canada. Canadians were criminally murdered. And I want to say to the families and loved ones of the people who were murdered that Canada remembers, Canada will not forget. And that's why I was in Richmond Hill. Marcy was there too, to show that this is a Canadian tragedy, that Canada remembers and Canada will not forget. On the incident, as you guys know very well, Canada is a rule of law country. Canada is a democracy.
Sorry, what?
Operational decisions about law enforcement are taken by the police of jurisdiction. Quite appropriately, political elected officials have no role in the taking of those decisions, and that's why I don't have any further comment.
Okay, except the lie detector test determined that was a lie, because the entire Emergencies Act is the Liberals taking control of policing operations away from the jurisdictional police, right? And saying, okay, well, you guys aren't dealing with this, we're gonna. So for her to say, quite appropriately, we would never do that. Yes, you did. You absolutely did, on a nationwide level, to deal with the single largest human rights demonstration, I think, in modern Canadian history, a peaceful one at that, because it was the greatest opposition that they had ever faced. So for her to say that, That's a lie. But also for her to say that the only important thing that really happened on that day was the vigil, that's not true. What happened to David Menzies was important, and the world seems to think that it's important. And Rebel News haters begrudgingly think that it is important. She's just an absolute flake. You know, if, let's say, for example, that Bibi Netanyahu had a journalist who was asking him about Gaza arrested. Could you imagine? Could you imagine the liberal outrage that you would see here in Canada if that happened? Right? They would, I don't know, bring a resolution before the United Nations. But Freeland does it. And by the way, David Menzies was there to ask about the issue that she was there for. Yeah, David Menzies thought that was important too, that it was the vigil, the 4th anniversary of the mass murder of Canadians. That's why David was there. David Menzies thought it was important enough to be there to ask her a question. She didn't think it was important enough to answer it. What she thought was important was obfuscating and violating the civil liberties and civil rights of a journalist simply doing his job, a journalist of 39 years. Just because people don't like Rebel News, it doesn't change the fact that David Menzies has been a working journalist for 39 years. And boy, he cranks out the content. It's real hard for the young folks at the company to keep up with old double hip replacement David Menzies on a good day. So I know that the mainstream media, they probably do as much in a week as David Menzies does in one day. So he's absolutely a journalist, because journalism is a thing you do, not some exclusive guild you join. Not like the stonemasons or stonecutters or whatever it was on Simpsons. It's a thing you do. And if you are committing the act of journalism, guess what? You're a journalist. And you don't need permission from the government or the police to do your job. Now, fast forward one more day. Very exciting. David Menzies flew to Winnipeg late last night. As an Albertan suffering through minus 44 right now, Winnipeg sounds absolutely balmy. I think it might be minus 25 or something. But I don't know what it was like for David Menzies to fly there. So we flew videographer Sid from Calgary so that he could get some reprieve from the deep freeze, and David Menzies from Toronto to Winnipeg to a Conservative Party announcement on the carbon tax, and signaling a ground shift, a sea change in the Conservative Party. David Menzies was welcomed in like any other journalist there. And I think this speaks to Pierre Poilievre's commitment to respect the independent press for the work that they do. And it shows that this is an absolutely different party than old Noodles and Butter, Andrew Scheer, and Vegetable Lasagna, Aaron O'Toole, both of which, violated the civil liberties of David Menzies by having him arrested. This shows that this new iteration of the Conservative Party is not the boring CBC compliant version of old. Anyway, David Menzies did not ask a question about himself or his own hobby horse. He asked a question of great concern to all Canadians, and that is about censorship. And let's see how this went.
Thank you so much. We'll now take 5 questions from the floor.
Mr. Poilievre, David Menzies with Rebel News. Mr. Poilievre, the Liberals use both a carrot and a stick to control journalists in Canada. The carrot is obviously government money, including massive payments to publishers and broadcasters. This corrupts their editorial independence. The stick is regulation, including censorship, banning reporters from press conferences, the CRA's journalism licensing regime, and the CRTC's new power to alter search engine algorithms. My question, sir, is this: which of these carrots and sticks would you keep as Prime Minister, and which would you repeal?
Thank you. We are going to repeal C11, the censorship law, which allows CRTC bureaucrats to secretly manipulate social media algorithms to promote certain information, demote other information, and censor certain things altogether. This is a form of censorship that exists nowhere in the democratic world. Margaret Atwood actually said that this was creeping totalitarianism. This is Margaret Atwood. She's not a conservative, obviously not a conservative, but she is an artist, a true artist, who believes that freedom of expression and freedom of the press is necessary. We're going to stop arresting journalists. It's outrageous for the Prime Minister to have, and his government to have journalists arrested for merely for asking questions of ministers and public officials. And we're going to make sure that the government does not use tax dollars to leverage news coverage in its favor. Right now, Justin Trudeau is censoring those that he disagrees with and trying to buy off the rest. And that undermines confidence among Canadians in the news media.
So that's great. Drastically different from the Conservative Party of old. In the olden days, the dark days of boringness of Erin O'Toole and Andrew Scheer, we would not have been allowed inside that press conference. And here's the thing, Conservative politicians, at Rebel News, we ask some damn good questions. And you are only doing yourself a disservice by blocking us from attending your press conferences. Although I think that's changed for sure here in Alberta. It's changed apparently at the federal level too, but I'm looking at you, Doug Ford in Ontario. You do yourself a real disservice by blocking us, because you know what? We're going to ask a good question. And if you are smart, you will give a great answer. You know that we are going to ask questions that the mainstream media won't. We're going to ask questions that regular, normal, severely normal Canadians want answers to. And I think you've got them. I think the arc of good society and good governance bends toward conservatism. And you have the opportunity to really distinguish yourself from the Liberals and, frankly, from Conservatives of like 3 years ago. If you let us in and let us ask a question, we're going to throw some heaters at you. And if you're smart and good at thinking on your feet, I think the Conservatives are, you're going to give a great answer. So why deny yourself that opportunity? It seems like, to block us, you really are snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. So maybe don't do that. We're not going to be sycophants. I mean, we're not the CBC versus Trudeau. We're going to ask you tough questions. And I think you're smarter than the Liberals, Conservatives. So you would do yourself well to answer our questions.